Welcome. So I'm really happy that you're joining us this afternoon. This morning, there were some technical problems with the audio, so we decided to put a live transcript. So hopefully this will help you in case we have more problems with the audio. So here's the order of things today. Welcome again for those joining us. My colleague Joe Campana is going to say a few words, and then we're going to have the panels, the two panels from our dear colleagues from Loyola, New Orleans. So, Joe, for you.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm grateful to steal a few minutes from Jacqueline, who is keeping us all on schedule, very much so. What's happened here already, which is so amazing, is that even with connections between just a few universities, a number of the possible future collaborations have kind of arisen. What I wanted to do as a way of also encouraging more of them is just to say a few words about the Center for Environmental Studies here at Rice, featuring a few of the things that we do as a kind of blanket general invitation to, hey, collaborate, come play with us. So I'm going to share screen. Let's see. Here, there we go. And is everyone seeing the Center for Environmental Studies page? Yes, thanks. Hey, Chris, good to see you. Okay, so here's where we are, and I don't want to spend time on sort of shameless promotion of our center. What I do want to do, however, is to sort of say, oops, sorry, the menu is hiding. One thing that we've been doing, working on, no, I don't need a thesaurus, thank you. Okay. I apologize. I'm left-handed and I don't use Macs. Okay, so I want to say a few things about some things that we are up to. Thank you. Okay. We have a webinar series, and I keep doing that. Okay, we have a webinar series called Planet Now. And in fact, we've just had our latest event, which was on geoengineering, biogeoengineered worlds, remaking nature. One of the things that we do is we plan webinars in conversations with the classes in our curriculum. All of those appear also here under event videos, and you can see all sorts of things that we've been up to. Whenever we can, everything that we do goes up for free online. We had a great conversation with Matthew Tejada recently, the Director for Environmental Justice at the EPA. I was able to do that with my great colleague Gisela Jefes, who we saw earlier. We also introduced as part of the Planet Now series, a new part of it, which this version of it is called Planeta Herido. I like to think of this as Planet Now, the World Edition, which is to say, we want to create resources in multiple languages whenever possible. And I have extraordinary colleagues, so I feel lucky to get to work with them in the hopes of that. So the first episode that my colleague Gisela put together, an interview with Samantha Schweblin, whose Fever Dreams already appeared in one of the earlier presentations, and also just launched on Netflix, the film version of it. So this is an interview with Samantha Schweblin that Gisela conducted, and we were lucky to work with Literal, a press here, based here in Houston, on the translation and transcription. And we hope to do more of these. Gisela is planning something for the spring, perhaps even Jacqueline will do one in the future. We'll see, but we want to kind of work with as many colleagues as we can here, but also elsewhere on webinars. So if you have an idea for one, reach out. We're planning this spring right now. Okay, we work a lot with, as is the kind of the theme for today, artists. And we've had great collaborations with an arts team, Marina Zurko and Sarah Rothberg, who created a future simulation system called Investing in Futures. As you can see from over here, it is a card deck. And I said at one point to them, this is amazing. And I love the physicality of the card deck, but could you put it online? So we underwrote this website, and we even collaborated on a new deck organized around waste. I'll just sort of click this. Basically, you draw cards in different categories, and based on those constraints, you have to construct a world you want to live in, whatever the constraints are in these categories. It's fascinating. I use it in my teaching a lot. I integrate a lot of arts practice into my teaching, as I'm sure most folk here do. And I also know that Marina Zurko and Sarah Rothberg are interested in collaborating with others when that works out, and these other sort of decks. They made one with Una Chaudhary called Ecosphere Cosmologies, which is much more about multi-species life. And ours, again, adds a waste category, since we were thinking a few years back with colleagues across histories, but also across disciplines. And so the waste category is fascinating. You deal your cards, you flip them, but some of these are just incredible. And they give you a constraint and you have to build a world around it. Our students find this kind of electrifying and they're fascinating in response to it. So we wanted to just share that as something we've been working on lately. One last thing, we're planning a number of different collaborations. We're lucky to have also a new project manager as part of a Mellon grant, Weston Twardowski, who's here in the audience on the Rice campus, who's working on some collaborations in theater and performance that hopefully will be coming about in the spring. But in the spring, we are also the institutional partner for the Society for Environmental Journalists. They will be in Houston with many sessions at the Royal Sonesta in the Galleria between March 28 and April 2nd. April 2nd is the Saturday. We're hoping to have a big event on campus. That's just a little teaser for, as a way of saying, come to Houston if you can. It should be a fantastic set of conversation. 400 environmental journalists descend upon this city in the Gulf Coast to think about what's happening here. And we'd be delighted to see as many of you can make it there. And I just want to thank Jacqueline for a little time to share some of what we're up to.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing all of us. Now we're going to have more sharing with Dr. Aimée K. Thomas. We're going to present all the good things that the people at Loyola, New Orleans are doing. So first we're going to have our little tech who's going to present their PowerPoint. So sorry for the little disruption, but we'll be ready in 1 second.
All right, everyone, I'll stand over here so you can kind of see me. I'm Aimée Thomas, and I am the director of the environment program at Loyola University. And we presented earlier on some of the work we're doing. And then this afternoon, we have a second part to our panel that is entitled Facing Disaster in a Coastal City, Scholarship, Service, Learning, and Holistic Community Engagement. So this is the second part of our series, and I'm going to introduce, go back please, our panelists that are in person here. And so starting on the far left on your screen and in the room to your right, this is Dr. Daniell. She teaches and writes in the areas of religious ecology and ecofeminist theology at Loyola in New Orleans. Her publications include Process and Difference Between Cosmological and Post-Structuralist Postmodernism, an edited volume with Catherine Keller, as well as several articles. Her dissertation about spirituality of place in New Orleans is indicative of her belief that living in New Orleans, a place of contagious creativity, deep-rooted spirituality, as well as tremendous tragedy, is a somewhat sane thing to do. I love that bio. So this is Dr. Daniell. With Dr. Daniell are two of our students. This is Jackie Mutter. She's a sophomore at Loyola University. She's majoring in environmental studies with a concentration in humanities. She transferred to us this fall from Illinois and hopes to become an environmental lawyer in the future. She's a member of our Students for Environmental Action student-led organization on campus, and she's also helping us with our Earth Week festivities on that committee. And Ty Murphy is our final panelist for this first session. She's a junior majoring in environmental studies with a concentration in humanities and a minor in sociology. She's a member of the Loyola's Social Justice Scholars Program, a program that awards social justice scholarships to incoming students who exhibit a high level of academic promise, as well as a demonstrated commitment to community service and activism. Last semester, she was a participant in Loyola's Emerging Leaders Program, an ideal program for first and second year students interested in exploring leadership at greater depth. In the future, Ty hopes to become an environmental sociologist, and she's well on her way. And we're happy she's a local New Orleanian and she stayed at home to make a difference. It's always fun. Not pictured, but will be joining us in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the second set of our panelists, led by my colleague in the English department, Dr. Chris Shaber. He's the Dorothy Harold Brown Distinguished Professor of English and an affiliated faculty member in our environment program at Loyola. He's the author of 7 books, including Searching for the Anthropocene, A Journey into the Environmental Humanities. And I'm going to add that he can take a book about airports and make it the most interesting thing that you've ever listened to or heard about. So ask him about that for sure. He has students joining him today. Augie Lodhotz, I hope I said that right, is a digital filmmaking major and a member of Loyola University's cheerleading team. Margot Bullock is a history major at Loyola. And Scarlett Mitchell-Yang is a computer science and digital filmmaking major at Loyola. So they will be the second part of part 2. So let me get this rolling for them. The title of this first panel is Cultural Performance as Practices of Spirituality and Healing, Healing Land and Community in Response to Environmental Devastation. Dr. Daniel.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us here at this conference. I'm already been having such a great time and just feel so welcomed and learning so much. So thanks to everyone at Rice for having us. So this project started to come about because of hearing about this conference and wanting to participate. And the basic idea of it is to look at how some different people in New Orleans and different groups in New Orleans create public ritual or cultural performance, and how they do that, especially since Katrina and other environmental and social disasters, as ways of healing and as bringing about a sense of spirituality. The methodology for this is obviously just to, I started with just people I knew. And again, this is really at the beginning stages. And so I put together a few names of people I know that I consider creatives in New Orleans. And then from there, they'll also introduce us to people, and the students may also introduce me to some people that should be looked at. But we talk to these people and ask, do you consider, you just find out about their work more, and then ask them, do they consider themselves to be doing spiritual work? I do, but do they, and how would they describe that? And do they consider themselves to be doing healing work? And if so, in what way? And so go to the slide. First, I'll do this and then I'll say some of the people. So yes, the idea of cultural performance or public ritual. Cultural performance can be, one way it's described is theater in life events. They're dramatic events that don't set themselves apart from the general public and the public's activities. So in the sense they are performances, but they also include the public. Typically in cultural performances, the boundaries dividing audience and performer are blurred. And to different degrees, audience members perform, and performers performers also create and are dramatic. And so cultural performances incorporate both ritualistic and entertainment purposes. And then go to the next one. Oh, I'll just say something about this particular image. This is just an image from the Backstreet Cultural Museum on Mardi Gras Day. Just kind of shows how that's the Mardi Gras Indians are performing there, a couple of groups of them, but also the public is there and kind of performing in interaction. And I use the term Carnival Chronotope. I believe that because Carnival, Mardi Gras is so important in New Orleans, and so many public performances, cultural rituals have come about in relation to Carnival, it kind of sets up a carnival culture in New Orleans, or the Carnival Chronotope in New Orleans, and creates just a lot of space, a lot of desire for people to participate in cultural performances. And so this might be Wynton Marsalis. I have it as Ellis Marsalis here because I've seen it attributed to both as father and son, but kind of a famous, if you're in New Orleans, kind of a famous quote, "In New Orleans, culture doesn't come down from on high, it bubbles up from the streets." And well, of course, there's going to be some of both. Anyone who's lived there for a while, really, from all the parading traditions, et cetera, I think have a feel for what this means, that there's just a lot of so many groups in New Orleans that put on parades, that put on their own types of cultural performances. And it is contagious. Okay, so now I was talking about the methodology, just interviewing these different artists who do art in different ways and who are also spiritual and are healers, as I define them anyway. And so Kathy Randalls is the first person on the list. She's the one, the only person so far out of the list that we have interviewed. And so we're going to be talking mostly about her work today. Sula Spirit Evans is a a musician and a healer and a doula, and puts on rituals in the city. I just participated in one with her for the Orisha goddess Yemaya. Monique Verdin, I've worked with her before, so we haven't asked her yet about this, but I think she'll be interested. She is from the Homa Indian tribe and also a graduate of Loyola University, and is an environmental filmmaker and just very involved in environmentalism and social projects. And then Chuck Perkins is someone I know, also a musician and a spoken word artist, a poet, and so he's someone else I've thought of. But then there will be, there'll be more and more people. Of course, it's endless. I could just continue forever on this. So yeah, I think go to the next one. And so I'm just going to say something first about Kathy Randalls. So just a little bit about her. Born and raised in New Orleans in the Lakeview area. She is a PK, a preacher's kid, and I think partly for that reason, from a more liberal Baptist type of background. She's very, very involved in social justice and in environmental justice, and she is a theater person. Went to Northwestern and came back home to do theater in the community. And she describes her work as multidisciplinary artistic collaborations that combine music, theater, dance, visual art, sculpture, always an educational aspect, environmental education, and sometimes video and online storytelling platforms. So very, very multidisciplinary. And now Jackie is going to say something about the process.
Yes, thank you. I'm Jackie Mutter, and like Dr. Daniel said, I'm going to talk a little bit about how Kathy Randalls and her collaborators find inspiration to create their productions. So it begins when one of the collaborators has a thought or a question or a topic that is on their minds and that they also believe to be on the minds of the community. And then from there, they see what is resonating most inside of them and also inside of the community, and that's how they form a theme for their creative pieces. And Hannah Pepper Cunningham, who is one of the performers in Cry You One, which is one of their productions, she has this quote that says, "Your best work is when your great needs meet the world's great hunger." And I think that's a really good quote to show how they don't just do a theme that they want to do, it's something that they believe will help the community and is important to the community. And then these various collaborators come together and explore these themes in a variety of different ways and begin to put the work together. And these pieces normally take 1 to 2 years before they're ready to be shared with the public. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ty for a little bit.
Adding on to the creative process, Randalls, when she chooses the group or the people that are going to participate in the work, it's usually a large group of people that she already works with. And in order for them to come up with like the message or what they want to resonate with the community about the environmental issues or social justice problems that they're facing, they basically just come together and make like a collaborative, collective decision. And from there, they develop the plot of the piece. For the Cry One, basically, she wanted to have a diverse cast. How unable to do so because of just the lack of diversity in the community. In the Cry One, there were 2 African American women who participated in basically leading the actors across the land. And Monique Verdin was also a woman. She represented the indigenous tribe, and she talked a lot about pre-colonization of the land. And she also wanted to have a more diverse group. She liked Latin American cast, Vietnamese cast, and just like the work we're doing here today, it's work in progress. It's not where she wants it to be, but she definitely would spoke about how she would like to have a more diverse cast, and she feels like basically representing New Orleans, she lacked that part, and moving further, she would definitely like to include people.
Okay, I'm just going to say a little bit about the performance called Cry You One. It's part of a trilogy, and all 3 of the pieces contemplate the intersection of land or environment, people, and cultures. And they're all about coastal land loss and other environmental disasters in coastal South Louisiana. They combine lament, celebration, dance, music, drama, all those things we talked about before, education as well, and they focus on the land, the people, and the culture. Randall's had been writing grants to study coastal communities back in the 1990s, and by the early 2000s, she had gotten that grant money, and then by 2005, of course, she realized, well, New Orleans itself was a frontline community in coastal land loss and in environmental destruction. She knew that on other levels, but she hadn't thought of New Orleans itself being a frontline community until that time, as far as land loss, et cetera. So the three pieces, if I can find where I have that. Yes, here it is. So just want to mention the three. The first one is called Beneath the Strata Disappearing, and very much about the land and the cultures both disappearing. A major question at that time was whether it was put on, the money she got for that, this play was put on right after Hurricane Katrina, maybe about 9 months after. And the question was, should people even rebuild? That was still one of the questions, even as people rebuilt. Next, Loup-Garou was more a one-person performance based on one of the characters from the first performance. So I don't know a lot about that one. But then Cry You One is the one that takes place a bit later and really brings forth the most hope and ideas of healing, although the first one did as well. In it, some guides who are performers take the people. This is cultural performance because even though it's set up a little bit more like a play, the audience is taken on a journey. So they split people up into six groups and taken on a journey. And on the journey, they meet different characters that explain what they think the issue is and how to remedy it. So one character who was both a spider, each character morphed into two different characters. So anyway, I'll just do their animal names. The spider talked about river diversions, and then Duloc the boar talks about dredging the river bottom. Zelda talked about repurposing trash and building the land with the big trash problem. The snake talked a lot about health and healing of communities. And one of the ways that the first one about river diversions was complexified was that the question of environmental justice and where rivers should be diverted, where you, because I guess a major river diversion was planned for Ironton, which is an area in Plaquemines Parish, which just recently was hit very hard by Hurricane Ida, but it's a very old African-American community. And just the process of who gets to decide where river diversions are put to rebuild the land, but perhaps you're destroying a community. So that issue was brought in. And I think we have to go a little bit faster because we have another panel in here. But I'll just say also the land is considered a character in these pieces, and I think in most of the pieces that she does. And we'll hear a little bit in a brief video we're going to show. But some of the actors talk about, and Kathy Randalls talks about how since they take all this time, like 2 years to do these, prepare these presentations, they take time to sit with the land, try to listen to the land, try to really observe, talk to the culture bearers that live in the different places to understand how people relate to the land. And one of the first places they did Cry You One was in St. Bernard Parish, where Monique Verdin, from the Homa tribe, she lives in that area, or her family had lived in that area, and so she could talk about it, how it once looked, how she understood it once looked, how it changed over time. And they even saw that in some areas where there was more water going into the areas, how it was much greener there, even though much of the land had been destroyed or was being destroyed by saltwater intrusion. So they saw a moment of hope there, or a place of hope, how once the water does get to where it needs to go, the rejuvenating will start to begin on its own. So I think we want to show so that the hope is in the land. And we want to show the video at this point. It's less than 3 minutes. So it's really short, but this is from, Kathy's not in this one, but it's from some of the other creators of this presentation where they talk about it. And there's also a much longer one that you can go to. It's a 15-minute. You can look at that on your own.
Sinking, waves in, waves out.
So anytime we go to a new space, you know, the first thing that we do is listen to the land, honor the energy and the ancestors or the beings or the entities that were there before us.
Y'all are seeing it, but I'm not sure the audience. 1 second. You probably have to unshare and reshare, I think is what it is. Yeah. And the music's so beautiful. Her husband does a lot of the music.
Sinking, waves in, waves out.
So anytime we go to a new space, you know, the first thing that we do is listen to the land, honor the energy and the ancestors or the beings or the entities that were there before us.
We're here on Maltby Lakes, which is this beautiful lake, this public reservoir. And Cry-U-One is a project of Creative Capital that is, it's a co-production between 2 companies, Mondo Bizarro and Art Spot Productions, that started in South Louisiana around 2011. And it's both a live processional performance. It premiered in the central wetlands in South Louisiana, where our goal was to take people to the land that's disappearing. And the idea was that the piece would be installed into the land that is being performed on. And it's also an online storytelling platform at cryone.com, where we feature different stories that both use to inspire the work you see in a live performance, but also stand alone to tell a story of what's happening to the coast of Louisiana.
In traditional New Orleans jazz, you know, they do this thing where all the instruments take a solo, and then at the end of the tune they'll do the head, and then they'll all solo on top of it at the same time. It's like this cacophony of soloing going on. And so a little bit of that spirit, I think, is what I'm trying to capture in the vocal music of Cry-U-One, where we just build part on top of part on top of part.
The answer is in your dreams. The answer is in your dreams.
And we love immersive, site-responsive work. Every site we go to creates an opportunity to do more problem solving and more investigation, and all of us are rooted in research.
That was one of the primary goals of this experience. It's like, we want to get the people talking to one another, and we want to talk to the people, and we want to sing together and move together and dance together and hopefully eat together afterwards. This whole picture is very nuanced and very complicated and involves all kinds of perspectives. And this type of participatory structure that we're trying to create, we hope, is a way for people to enter the story or the idea in multiple ways.
We wanted to be more celebratory and really capture the celebratory spirit of New Orleans especially, and bring that sort of feeling into this conversation about the future that we face.
Okay, Jackie's going to say something?
Yes.
Yes.
So a question that I really wanted to ask Kathy Randles when we were interviewing her was, how do her performances resonate with the community afterwards? Because I knew that one of her goals with the performances was to boost community involvement in the fight to save coastal Louisiana. Her response was that the performances really stick with people afterwards and leave them with open hearts and feelings of gratitude. And throughout the performance, as you can kind of see, the actors really try to get the audience involved in a lot of different ways, whether that's singing together or having discussions at the end. And Kathy Randles said that this leaves the audience thinking and feeling on many levels, and people definitely remember her performances for a long time. And another thing she said was that the idea is to bring the audience into a space of collective dreaming. And I think that's a really great quote, because these performances provide a space for people to come together with a common hope for the future. And I think that's really special.
Okay, good. And I think we'll end it about there. Just wanted to say that spirit, then the idea of spirit and healing, for some that might just seem obvious from the things that we've seen here, but spirit is, in my understanding, is an aspect of existence or of energy, of power in a good way, an energy that brings hope, sustains hope, brings relationality, inspires creativity, and can even the kind of creativity that, you know, people can come together and through the coming together can experience healing. So that's why I connect these different things. But there will be much more to come because we'll be looking at how other creatives also think about these ideas. And
Great.
yeah,
Okay.
I think that's what we have.
So that was a focus on the creative, spiritual, ritual art. And so
Yes.
now we're gonna, so if you have some questions, jot them down or put them in the chat. But we're gonna switch over to Chris Shaberg now, who's gonna talk about his course in ecological thought and tell us his interpretation of that in the path of disaster. So we can pin maybe Chris. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's see, I think I can do it. We're gonna pin Chris, or you got him? Okay, perfect. All right, Chris, take it away.
Okay,
Dr.
hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for having us. Thanks Jacqueline and Joe for organizing this, and Aimée for getting it all together. So we're going to be talking about a book that we read and discussed this semester in my ecological thought seminar. And after we discussed it and worked with this book, a few students and I decided we wanted to take it as a chance to think through some of these topics for the conference here. So I'm going to read, and then Augie's going to read a little bit, and then I think Scarlett had something come up, but she recorded herself reading. And so if I can be given permission to share my screen and audio, I think I can play it. Otherwise, maybe Augie will read Scarlett's part. Okay, so we'll figure this out. And then Margot's gonna wrap it up. Okay, so ours is a little boring compared to Professor Daniels and her crew, because we're just gonna be reading, but thank you for for listening. Okay, so this talk is called Doing Nothing with Ecological Thought. Midway through an exhausting fall semester, Delta variant, Hurricane Ida, Facebook going meta, my ecological thought students and I read Jenny Odell's book, How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy. The first day we sat down to discuss it, I asked them to leave their phones and computers and books and backpacks and go off somewhere for 20 minutes and do nothing. I saw one student mouth the words, "I'm so excited about this." They scattered across the quad, some settling down in the grass nearby, others setting out for the park across St. Charles Avenue. I sat among some cypress knees and let the quiet, or relative quiet, sink in. It was the first time I'd felt like this since after the hurricane, when power was off and there was simply so little to do. I listened to crows squawks and resounding above campus and watched them soar and bank and dive at one another. Odell suggests it shouldn't be called bird watching at all, but rather bird noticing, because there's really a passive aspect to it, waiting for birds to happen to us. We regathered a different group of ecological thinkers. What did it feel like to do nothing? The first student remarked, "At first I felt like I was in timeout, like a kid. I reflexively thought about what I'd done wrong to get here, but then it started to feel different. It felt nice." The second student bluntly noted that it was impossible, this doing nothing, because of course we were still doing things. Yet in this awareness, new thoughts opened up. What was this elusive nothing we were seeking? And what might it have to do with untangling the ecological knots we found ourselves in this class and in general? A student looked up nothing only to find a matrix of meanings, from no single thing to the absence of progress to something without value. This student noted how these meanings pressurized her experience of simply listening during the 20 minutes, picking up on the vibrations of sound waves bouncing off the buildings on campus at turns, muffling and amplifying the strange sounds of college life. As the next student points out, college life while doing nothing includes the brown animals skittering around and the boredom creeping in, indestructible. Another student worries she was doing it wrong at first. Then she had a shift in perspective and started to actually enjoy it. One student who went to the park and sat on a bench was approached by a stranger who asked, "Are you a student?" Anxious at first, she replied, "Yes, I am a student, and right now I am doing an assignment. I'm supposed to do nothing." "Oh, good luck with that," the stranger replied and walked away. Another student sat in the park watching ducks and turtles and noticed how the animals went still after the bonging of the church bells nearby. Then after a few moments, the animals would restart their activities. She thought about the culture of overwork and how our leisure time is so often co-opted for profit and productivity, and how it's no wonder that mental illness is as common as it is in this atmosphere. A student followed up with how she noticed the difficulty of pausing the mind, which wants to go everywhere at once. To simply stop and stare felt kind of grounding. What does it mean to be both focused and not focused? One student had climbed the exterior staircase of a nearby building and sat watching shadows inch across the brick pathways that crisscrossed the quad. This constant, if incremental motion gave him a feeling of being weirdly connected to the light. It sounds obvious, but felt profound. Another student noted how our passage of delimited time, 20 minutes, and paying attention to it made her more conscious of how we live through time's ceaseless passing. At the end of class, we asked, how can Odell's deceptively simple methodology aid our ecological thinking in the wake of one disaster and in the path of disasters to come? So now I'm going to turn it over to Augie.
Hello. Odell stresses that one of the many goals of doing nothing is to increase the doer's ability to observe. Within our society where attention is marketable through advertising, social media, etc., learning to control our attention through careful observation rather than jump into conclusions allows us to better accomplish Odell's goal of resisting the attention economy. Odell uses the practice of deep listening, or as she says, listening in every possible way to everything possible, end quote. To practice this control, by just stopping to listen, we encounter all the sounds that often might be drowned out or even silence, which Gordon Hempton, an acoustic ecologist, claims as the presence of everything. Through this increased perception, we can better ground ourselves in the current moment and space by learning to better perceive our surroundings, strengthen our connectivity to our environment. Furthermore, we also increase our sensitivity, not only to our environment, but to people and to relationships we have, because we can better listen.
Thanks, Augie. Okay, I'm going to try to share Scarlett's talk now, and please tell me if you can hear this.
One of the things our class discussed when we first started going through this book was concept itself. What does it mean to do nothing? How does this equate to resistance? On the surface, it seems like an oxymoron. Resistance is struggle. Resistance is active. So if one does nothing, that person becomes a passive component of their environment. At least that's how we're taught to view a human not working, specifically a human body not working on something constructive. And this is understandable, considering all of the global disasters that we've gone through since 2016. There is always something that needs to be done, whether that pertains to schooling or to disaster relief for a Category 5 hurricane, or to spreading awareness about global warming. With that in mind, let's return to the idea that was mentioned before. It's impossible to do nothing. I agree with this. All creatures and things are in the process of doing something. Humans are alive. We are thinking and experiencing the world around us through our senses. If we are asleep, we are breathing and healing ourselves. If we are dead, our body is in the process of decay and redistribution, whether that's as a body underground, as cremated gases in the air, or as a decomposing source of sustenance on the mountaintop. The practice of doing nothing, of not actively doing a thing, thus retains constructiveness. The very minimum, it becomes breathing room, a momentary safe space from the things that call for our attention. The most, it becomes a negation of the frictions in the world. Let me explain. The negation of friction is physical in the sense that you relax into your environment and bond to it momentarily. Negation of friction is literal in the sense that you resist giving your attention and energy to anyone in conflict. The negation of friction is figurative, as doing nothing allows you to resist insensibility and numbness. For a lot of people, this exercise in nothing was thrust upon them in the wake of COVID, in the wake of destructive earthquakes, social outcry of a loss of electricity from a sitting hurricane. For a moment, you, I, we are forced to just watch, to just feel, to just be. Perhaps if we implemented and utilized these moments of nothing into our daily lives, we can not only increase productivity, but also strengthen our bonds with our surrounding community of creatures like birds, trees, other people, and the foundational objects of support and monument that make up our surroundings, like our roads, our mountains, our rivers. Doing nothing, whether it's a coffee break, guided meditation, doing chores, or bird noticing, made passive. But it is also a tool and an exercise in mental and sense-based recalibration. You can prioritize what is important in a daily sense and in a lifelong sense. We all practice just a little bit more of
Okay, thank you, Scarlett. And now we have Margot.
Hi. So I decided to continue practicing doing nothing since we started, or since we once had like the nothingness activity in class. And I just wanted to kind of talk about my experiences and what I've learned from the process. So over the course of the past few weeks, I've devoted time every day to doing nothing. And during the day, this is often the only time that I'm fully distractionless. I can do nothing everywhere, at my desk, on my porch, in the Peace Quad at school, and even in a place as hectic as the dining hall. Doing nothing requires me to remove myself from the situation I'm in and be at peace with the idea that, while things never stop occurring, I don't always need to be part of the chaos. I wanted to mark the difference between giving time to nothing and spending time on nothing. So often, we spend our time on meaningless tasks that, in the long run, have no effect on our lives. We do these tasks because we're told that they are important, and we don't question if we'll actually be better for it. We unconsciously spend hours of our time working for other people, trying to squish ourselves into square-shaped holes of society and get dizzingly caught up in the act of it. We forget that we can function autonomously, and for some people, doing nothing might be the only thing that they actually do for themselves. I think we're so opposed to the idea that we should do nothing because we have normalized the belief that we ought to do something in order to avoid failure. We feel obliged to complete tasks that make us feel productive and spend so much time doing this, judging our worthwhileness as humans on our levels of success. We are afraid of the idea of doing nothing and don't allow ourselves to reap the benefits that come from practicing it over a period of time. In doing nothing, we can allow ourselves a break from the constant cognitive engagement that we are subjected to. We can release our souls from that trap, if only for 15 minutes. Doing nothing brings peace. We spend so much time scrolling to find our happiness that we don't realize that it can actually come from stepping away from that artificial world. Once I started doing nothing, a new sense of awareness emerged within me. I can now more easily identify where I want to give my energy. And while I still spend my time on tasks every day, I can differentiate between which tasks require me to spend time and which require me to give my time. So trust me, put your phone away and turn your podcast off, sit on a bench and do nothing.
Thank you, Margaret. Margot, thanks everyone. And this was our experiment. Thank you.
Okay, so we have actually a little bit of time for questions for our panelists that were presenting in person and then also on Zoom for everybody virtually. And so I want to open it up. Anybody who has a question? So yes.
Sure. Thanks for this. Really enjoy both of these. Something that I'm sort of thinking through across both of them is the idea of play and making space to play and what playfulness means, particularly at this wonderful interdisciplinary event, what playfulness enables, both in theatrical play, but also a lot of what you're describing with that idea of nothingness, but it creates opportunity to just play around and engage, and what happens out of that. And not to go too in the weeds, but to throw out an example along the idea of kind of spiritual recovery practice. Sankofa in New Orleans is a community center that grew out of an artistic grant and actually came out of an arts process post-Katrina, became a major community center and an urban garden, now a 40-acre natural preserve in the city. And the potential of where that started in 2009 is nowhere near what it is today, and the idea of what it would grow into. And a lot of that was allowing the space of artistry and activism to grow on its own and see what it develops. And I'm really interested if you could all speak a little bit about the value of play in your work and what you're seeing that as a potential way to approach research and collaboration and activism, particularly in a climate realm where we often feel so overwhelmed. What can play enable us to do? Thank you.
So I'm looking at you, Chris, and I'm looking at you, Anne, and I'll let y'all decide who wants to respond first or, get your students engaged. Chris, do you want to say something first?
Sure. I think for us, it was just in a way, a coincidence that we read that book after the hurricane, and as we were all kind of reeling from this like crazy disaster semester that was also in a way a synecdoche for these larger disasters that we'd been thinking about and talking about in class. And I think just having the kind of prompt to do this, to do nothing, reflect on it, I think it was sort of therapeutic for us individually and collectively as a class. But I think there was this sense that like, whoa, imagine how this could be scaled up. Imagine what the effects of this could be if this were taken seriously. And I was just personally kind of, impressed and overwhelmed by the response to this book, which in some ways was the most like offbeat book that we've read in this class in terms of its direct connection to like in the environmental humanities. It's a little bit more out there. It's a little bit more engaged with the arts, but in other ways, it was exactly the book we needed to read. And so I definitely think that idea of making the space and time for play took on a kind of heightened activist sense.
And I'll also add that Chris is one of those professors that always allows his students that space to get creative and play. I mean, if you want to put play in quotes, I mean, that's why he and his students always produce such great work, is because they're able to have that time where they give themselves the ability to be able to think. I mean, I'm speaking for you, Chris, but that's what I see from an outsider of the students that are in your classes.
Well, wonderful. I kind of forgotten about play. So thank you. And over the, ever since kind of 2016, I forgot about the beauty and joy of playfulness and play. But I think it is healing and generates spirit. You can see in Kathy Randall's work and it, the collaborators she works with, they're all about that. I mean, it's serious issues, but they try to bring playfulness into every performance that they do and try to encourage the so-called audience. I mean, it is an audience, but the audience always participates in some way, either in dance or music or they try to eat together afterwards, etc. So I think for the healing of community and just bringing about the possibility of creativity, collaborative creativity, play would be essential. And I just know in my own family, this kind of connects to ritual and cultural performance, but in my own family, we're all kind of very, kind of the people that don't talk about much, afraid to kind of do that. But when this is a different kind of play, but when we will play card games together, some kind of ritualistic activity where everyone kind of knows what they're supposed to do and how, it enables a playfulness and joyfulness to come out of us. So we have the ritual and we're doing that, and then the playful spirit can come out, and you have all the impromptu that comes out too. And it's healing for the family. So and it's when we're spiritually alive. So that's beautiful. I'm glad you brought that up. In relation to the healing of the land, I'm not sure what to say about that yet, but I know groups like Randall's are certainly doing that. And then I would just, the other connection, for cultural performance and like Mardi Gras performances, I think that too, because there's a ritual involved, and there's so many different types of performance, because there's a ritual that people kind of know what to do. So you kind of know what to do, but it's also not too serious at the same time. And so in that, knowing the roles, then the playfulness can pop out somehow. Then you have all these moments of the impromptu, of playfulness. So it's really interesting. If y'all want to add to that.
Yeah, actually, could I add something?
Yeah.
So I know when we were interviewing Kathy Randall, she said that in order to heal the earth, we have to heal ourselves first. And so I think that playfulness definitely ties into healing ourselves and then eventually the earth.
Okay, we might have time for one more.
Yes.
I think we have time for one more question. If anybody else, great question, by the way.
Great. Hi, thanks. This is a really wonderful panel. I'm very grateful to have learned about a lot of practices and that I don't know about in a book that I haven't had a chance to read. It just occurs to me, especially after Weston's question about play, that some of what's so interesting about both of these presentations and the material you're working on is that play has found a set of forms, right? Okay, so I'm a poet, I think a lot about forms. They're not restrictions. They provide structure for doing things. And we're at a time in which there are so many reasons why it seems like we don't have structures to do the things we want to do. So I really appreciate the way ritual and contemplative practice seem to help channel and structure efforts at regeneration, right? Which mean a lot of things in a lot of places. And I especially appreciate Jacqueline's comment too, that there are these sort of layers of regeneration that need to happen simultaneously, which are not always the same thing, but they're in tune with one another. So I very much appreciate learning a lot about some structures and forms for regeneration to happen. Thanks very much.
Okay, I would just like to wrap up by saying we appreciate you listening to the way in which our program at Loyola, our environment program, contributes to some of the works that hopefully are interesting and engaging to you, and definitely interesting and engaging to us and are transformative in how it helps our students think differently, act differently, go on to careers that are very satisfying and gratifying for them. So great job, students, for participating. But those of you who are listening and in the audience, if you can come up with some ways in which to collaborate and reach out and offer things that you have done or things you've read or watched that you think we would appreciate, we welcome that. And we'll be here till tomorrow. So we would love to hear from you during breaks, and one-on-one would be great. So thanks for listening.